See?
A van covered in flowers and psychedelic paint that somehow became one of the most recognized vehicles in American pop culture history. A cartoon machine that Hollywood decided to build for real, put on camera, drove through actual streets, and then treated with the same indifference it treats every movie vehicle that isn't the Batmobile or the DeLorean. The van existed. A physical, drivable, honest-to-goodness mystery machine with 4 wheels and an engine and a paint job that would get you pulled over in 49 out of 50 states. And almost nobody can tell you where it is right now. Hi, my name is Johnny, and this is American Muscle. The cartoon car that somehow became real. The Mystery Machine has a cultural origin story that most people have never actually thought about, and it matters for understanding why building a real version of it was both an exciting idea and a logistical nightmare. Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? Debuted on CBS on September 13th, 1969. Think about that year for a second. 1969. Woodstock had just happened. The counterculture was at its absolute peak. Flower power was everywhere. And Hanna-Barbera, with the timing that only accidental genius produces, dropped a Saturday morning cartoon featuring a group of teenagers who drove around in a flower-painted van solving mysteries. The van wasn't incidental. The van was the whole vibe. The original Mystery Machine design was a forward control van silhouette, meaning the cab sat directly over the front axle, wide and boxy with a flat nose. Think less Ford Transit and more something that belonged parked at a commune in Marin County. The paint scheme was teal green as the base color, with a large orange and yellow flower on the side. The name Mystery Machine in a groovy hand-lettered font, and additional flower and geometric accents scattered across the body. It was unmistakably a product of its moment. And because that moment never really dies in the American imagination, the van never died with it. Here's the thing about the Mystery Machine that separates it from most cartoon vehicles. The Batmobile is a fantasy. The General Lee is an extreme modification of a real car, but nothing about it is subtle. The Mystery Machine looks like something a real person could have actually built in their driveway in 1971, with a few cans of house paint and strong opinions about self-expression. That accessibility is part of why replica builds of this van exist in numbers that border on the genuinely absurd. We'll get to that problem later, and trust me, it is a problem. For 3 decades, the Mystery Machine existed only in animation and in the garages of obsessive fans. The show ran, got canceled, got revived, got rebooted, spawned spin-offs, and through all of it, the van remained a cartoon. Then Hollywood looked at the nostalgia goldmine sitting in the Scooby-Doo IP and decided it was time to find out what the Mystery Machine looked like when it weighed 3 tons and needed an actual parking space. From animation to asphalt. The road from animation to a real physical van is never as straightforward as it sounds, and the Scooby-Doo productions are a perfect example of why. Because before we get to the van, most people picture when they close their eyes and think, Mystery Machine, we need to back up. Because that van didn't just appear out of nowhere in 2002. There was a whole runway of live-action Scooby-Doo content before the theatrical release, and every single production needed a physical vehicle to put on camera, which means there were Mystery Machine builds happening long before Warner Brothers wrote the check that made it a major studio problem. The made-for-television movies of the late 90s and early 2000s each required their own production vehicles. Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island in 1998, Scooby-Doo and the Witch's Ghost in 1999, Scooby-Doo and the Alien Invaders in 2000. These productions needed a van. They got vans, built on tighter budgets, used for whatever the production required, and then dispersed through the same indifferent pipeline that has swallowed every working movie vehicle that didn't have a dedicated preservation, budget, and someone paying close attention. These were not hero builds. They were not carefully engineered, camera-ready machines built to anchor a franchise. They were functional, they were recognizable, they did the job. And then they were gone. Now here's the question that fans have been arguing about in forums for the better part of 2 decades, and it is a more interesting question than it first appears. What do you actually build a Mystery Machine from? Because the original cartoon design is not based on any single real-world vehicle. That forward control silhouette, flat nose, cab, sitting directly over the front axle, boxy upright profile, is a shape that existed in American automotive production, but never in a form that maps perfectly onto the cartoon. Which means every builder who tackled this for a real production had to make a judgment call before they ever picked up a wrench. Do you find a period-correct forward control van and restore it into something camera-ready? Do you start with a more modern donor vehicle and fabricate custom bodywork to approximate the shape? Do you build something from scratch on a truck chassis and accept that the mechanical underpinnings have nothing to do with the exterior? There is no objectively correct answer. There is only the answer that works for the budget, the timeline, and the specific demands of the production asking for the vehicle. For the television productions, the answer generally leaned toward modified existing vans with custom bodywork and paint applied over whatever donor vehicle made the most sense at the time. The results were functional. They were recognizable on screen. They communicated Mystery Machine to an audience that was primed to see Mystery Machine, but they were television builds, built to be seen, not studied. Good enough for the small screen, where the camera moves on before the viewers can notice the details that don't quite match. The theatrical release was a different conversation entirely. A $116 million budget demands a different standard of execution. The van that ended up on the poster, on the lunchbox, in the trailer that played before every family film in the summer of 2002. That van required a real answer to the base vehicle question, and the answer, when it finally came, was exactly right. The 2002 theatrical van, the hero build. Warner Brothers greenlit the theatrical Scooby-Doo adaptation, with James Gunn writing the script. Yes, that James Gunn before Guardians of the Galaxy, when he was writing gleefully irreverent studio comedies, and Raja Gosnell directing. The film starred Freddie Prinze Jr., Sarah Michelle Gellar, Matthew Lillard, and Linda Cardellini as the gang, with a CGI Scooby that was, let's say, a product of its time. The production had a real budget, a real theatrical window, and a real need for a mystery machine that could anchor a franchise if the film landed. And it did land. The 2002 film opened to $54 million domestically in its opening weekend. It finished with $153 million worldwide. A sequel was inevitable, which meant the van wasn't a one-and-done prop. It was an asset. The hero van built for the production was based on a 1966 Ford Econoline. Now, here's where it gets interesting. The forward-controlled Econoline, built from 1961 through 1967, is one of the closest production vehicles ever made to the original cartoon silhouette. Flat nose, cab over the front axle, boxy, upright profile. Wide and weird, and unmistakably from an era when American automotive design had not yet been told it needed to be aerodynamic. It was, in other words, almost exactly what the Mystery Machine was always supposed to look like. The production team took the Econoline body and built on it. The exterior was given the full cartoon treatment: teal-green base, the orange and yellow flower on the side panel, the Mystery Machine lettering, the geometric accents. The interior was dressed for camera work, which meant it had to be functional as a shooting environment for 4 adult actors and a production crew trying to capture chemistry through a windshield at speed. That is not a small ask. Anyone who has ever tried to film inside a vintage van knows that the space between charming and claustrophobic is about 6 inches in any direction. Multiple versions of the van were built for the production, which is standard practice on any major film involving a hero vehicle. You build the pristine hero version for close work. You build stunt versions for anything that involves speed, impact, or the very real possibility that something goes wrong, and you need a van that can be replaced without stopping production. The exact number of vans built across the 2002 production and the 2004 sequel, Scooby-Doo, 2 Monsters Unleashed, varies depending on which production source you're reading, but the most consistently cited figure is somewhere between 3 and 5 total vehicles across both films. Here's something that gets glossed over in most retellings. The paint on a vehicle like this is not simple. Teal green sounds like a color you could mix in an afternoon. The flower graphics, the lettering, the geometric details, all of that has to be executed at a level of fidelity that holds up under a camera lens that will be 6 inches from the panel work, under studio lights designed to expose every imperfection. The painters who worked on these vans were not pointing a spray can at a drop sheet in a parking lot. This was a professional custom paint job, executed to a cartoon spec, which is a very specific kind of difficult. Cartoons don't have reflections, panel gaps, or surface imperfections. real vans do. Bridging that gap without making the finished vehicle look like a carnival ride requires real skill. The result worked. On screen, the Mystery Machine looked like the Mystery Machine, which sounds obvious until you remember how many times Hollywood has taken an iconic fictional vehicle, built a real version, and produced something that looks like a wishful approximation of the original. The Scooby-Doo van didn't have that problem. It was the van, and then filming wrapped. The theft, the tours, and the trail going cold. Here is where every movie car story hits the same wall, and the Mystery Machine story hits it harder than most. After the 2002 film finished production, the Hero van made several documented public appearances. Warner Brothers used it for promotional tours. It showed up at fan events. It appeared at theme parks. There's a period of roughly 2 to 3 years after the film's release where the van was a marketing asset and its whereabouts were relatively trackable because the studio was actively moving it around and pointing cameras at it. The 2004 sequel kept some of the vans in active use, though production sources are inconsistent about whether the original Hero van was used again or whether a refurbished version was built for continuity. This is the kind of detail that seems trivial until you're trying to trace a specific vehicle and you realize that without a VIN number tied to production documentation, you're essentially trying to tell two identical twins apart from a description written by someone who only saw them once from across a parking lot. Here's where I'll be straight with you, because that's what this channel does. Around 2005, 2006, the trail starts fragmenting. The promotional tour circuit winds down. The studio's active use of the van as a marketing tool slows, and the vans, plural because there were multiple, remember, start dispersing into the world through the same channels that have swallowed every movie vehicle from every production that didn't have someone paying specific attention. There are forum posts. There are always forum posts. Classic van forums, movie car collector forums, and at least 2 dedicated Scooby-Doo fan communities that have been trying to track these vehicles since roughly 2007. Some of those threads are genuinely impressive pieces of amateur research, cross-referenced sightings, partial VIN leads, photographs of vans at auction previews that might or might not be production vehicles. And some of those threads are exactly what you'd expect from internet forums, which is to say they're a mixture of genuine leads, confidently stated misinformation, and at least one person who insists their cousin definitely worked on the production and knows where the van is but can't say. Every single forum has that guy. Every one. What can be confirmed from credible sources is this. At least one of the production vans from the 2002 film was acquired by a private collector in the mid-2000s. Whether that collector still holds it, whether it has changed hands since, and whether it exists today in screen-accurate condition, or has been modified, repainted, or parted out is not publicly documented. That's not a dramatic conclusion. That's just the honest answer, and this channel doesn't dress up the honest answer to make it more cinematic than it actually is. One additional documented thread worth mentioning. A van matching the production specifications appeared at a California auto show in approximately 2008, with documentation suggesting studio provenance. It did not cross an auction block at that event, and subsequent attempts to track the owner have not produced a publicly confirmable result. It's a lead, not a conclusion. The replica problem. Now we need to talk about the replica problem, and I want you to understand something before we get into it. This isn't a footnote. This is the reason the Mystery Machine story doesn't have a clean ending. This is the wall every serious researcher hits when they try to track down the real van, and it is a wall built entirely out of love. Obsessive, meticulous, slightly unhinged love for a cartoon van from 1969, which is both beautiful and incredibly inconvenient. The Mystery Machine is one of the most replicated vehicles in American pop culture history. Not most replicated movie cars, most replicated vehicles, period. At any given moment, there are somewhere between 200 and 500 Mystery Machine replica builds in existence across the United States alone. Let that number sit for a second. 500. That is not a niche hobby. That is a movement. And the range of what qualifies as a replica is genuinely enormous. On one end, you have full rotisserie restorations of period-correct forward control econolanes, stripped to bare metal, rebuilt from the floor up, painted to exact cartoon specifications by people who have clearly spent more time studying a 1969 Hanna-Barbera animation cell than most people spend on anything in their entire lives. These builds are serious, documented, photographed, shown at major events. They are, by any reasonable standard, extraordinary pieces of custom work. On the other end, you have a 1992 Dodge Ram van with a flower sticker from an arts and crafts store and the words "Mystery Machine" hand-painted above the rear wheel, well in a font that is doing its best. And honestly, respect the commitment. Truly. But that is not the same thing, and we both know it. The problem isn't the replicas themselves. The problem is what they do to authentication. When a van surfaces at an auction preview or a regional car show, and someone says this is the production vehicle from the 2002 Warner Brothers film, proving that claim requires a specific chain of documentation that a significant number of these vehicles simply do not have. A VIN number traceable to a studio purchase order, correspondence between the production and the builder, behind-the-scenes photographs showing that exact vehicle on set with identifying marks visible, a paper trail that survived 2 decades of storage, ownership changes, and the general indifference that Hollywood extends to vehicles once the cameras stop rolling. Without that chain, you have a van that is visually identical to the hero vehicle from a major studio release, and no mechanism whatsoever for proving it is or isn't the real thing. That is not a theoretical problem. There is at least one documented case of a mystery machine being offered for sale with explicit claims of studio provenance that collapsed the moment researchers cross-referenced the VIN against available production records. The seller may have believed the claim sincerely, or may not have. Either way, a buyer who skipped that homework would have spent serious money on a very impressive replica that had never been within 100 miles of a film set. Here's the irony that makes this whole situation almost poetic. The mystery machine is so culturally embedded, and the best replica builds are executed at such a high level, that the real production van has become effectively invisible inside the noise of its own legacy. Hollywood built a vehicle for a $116 million franchise, let it walk out the door without a tracking number, and released it into a world where thousands of devoted fans were already building exact copies. The van didn't disappear into obscurity. It disappeared into abundance. And that is somehow worse. The unsolved mystery. So here's where things actually stand. Stripped of the forum speculation and the wishful thinking and the confident claims from people who heard something from someone who once shook hands with a Warner Brothers parking attendant. What is confirmed? Multiple vans were built for the 2002 production and the 2004 sequel. At least one of those vans was based on a period-correct forward control Ford Econoline. The vans were used for promotional purposes after the first film's release. At least one van passed into private ownership in the mid-2000s. The current location, condition, and ownership of any specific production van is not publicly documented. What is not confirmed? Claims of studio provenance attached to vans that have appeared at auction previews or car shows without documentary support. Reports of vans being destroyed after production, which appear on some forums but have no verified source. The claim, which surfaces periodically, that a specific van is in a particular private collection. These may be true, they may not. Without documentation, they are leads, not facts. What is genuinely unknown? Whether the hero van exists today in screen-accurate condition, or whether it has been modified, repainted, or disassembled. Whether it has changed hands since its last confirmed sighting. Whether any documentation of its VIN number and production history exists in a form that would allow definitive authentication. That is an unsatisfying answer. I know it is. But this is the thing about movie car history that doesn't get said enough. The unsatisfying answer is often the correct one. And dressing it up as something more definitive than the evidence supports doesn't serve anyone. It just creates another layer of mythology that the next researcher has to dig through before they can get back to the actual facts. If you are the person who owns a van with documented Warner Brothers production provenance from the 2002 Scooby-Doo film, the comment section below is open. Not for speculation, for documentation. There is a real story here waiting to be finished, and right now, nobody has the last chapter. Here is what the Mystery Machine story actually is, underneath the paint and the flowers and the Saturday morning nostalgia. It is the story of a vehicle that was built with real craftsmanship, used to bring a beloved piece of American childhood to physical life, and then released into the world with the same indifference that Hollywood has always extended to the vehicles that do the actual work of making films feel real, not the hero cars, not the Aston Martins and Chargers and DeLoreans that get their own museum wings. The working vehicles. The ones that hauled actors across backlots and anchored franchise openings, and then got sold through prop liquidations because nobody thought twice about what they were letting go. The Mystery Machine deserved better than that. Not because it is a particularly rare vehicle mechanically. A 1966 Econoline is not a Ferrari, but because of what it represented to the people who watched those films. The van is every road trip you imagined as a kid, every adventure that starts with a group of friends pointing towards something unknown, every moment where the solution to a problem is getting in the vehicle and driving toward it. Somewhere out there, it exists. In a garage or a warehouse, or behind a chain-link fence in someone's backyard in a neighborhood where nobody knows what's parked there. Or it doesn't, and it was quietly stripped down and forgotten because nobody was watching when it mattered. Either way, the story isn't finished. An American Muscle will be here when it is. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and we'll see you in the next lane.